Okay, guys, this is part 5 of the Lonesome Louie saga. So, Lonesome's decision to support me while I wrote my novel cleared up any doubts I had about his mental health. I mean, there was literally no one in his right mind that would have handed the 20-year-old me a bunch of cash. So, Louis gave me $1,000 for starters, told me to find myself a nice little furnished apartment, buy some groceries, and have a phone installed so I could call him the next time I needed more loot. There was also some perfunctory bit in there about how he was investing in me and the funds are really an advance against royalties. But I figured that was just for Claire's benefit. I mean, I knew Lonesome gave as little a shit about money as I did. So what I heard was, I can't take it with me, fucker. So blow granddaddy's bucks on the biggest binge ever. The next day, Ned Gumbo and I drove he and Claire to the airport, and then we headed to the Lake Tahoe casinos for what I called later my Mezcal and Mescaline tour. $1,000 then was worth $10,000 now, and it took me a week to blow it on drugs, gambling, and alcohol. When I got back to Burlingame, I called Lonesome, asked him to wire me another grand, and after I spent the next couple weeks getting everyone I knew, and myself in particular, as high and drunk as possible, my request to Louis for more money was met with an admonition to get my ass to San Angelo. He was going to oversee my writing efforts for my own good. And I was okay with that. You know, I've always been a grass is greener kind of guy, and I was curious about life in Texas. I remember Gumbo had to use his considerable persuasive powers to get me on the plane to Dallas, and the transfer airline had me met at the airport after some incident with a liquor cart and the bulkhead. It's funny, decades later, I was selling my emu t-shirts at a convention in San Angelo when I met up with Claire, and she clearly recalled my arrival in that small Texas town. Passengers disembarked on the tarmac, she said, and that's where Louis and I were when your plane taxied up. You were such a terrible drunk, we assumed you'd probably miss the flight. Then a couple police cars screeched through the gate, sirens wailing, and pulled up at the plane. Well, God almighty damn, said Louis. Looks like Park made the flight after all. So she said, the door opened. They pushed the exit ramp up. The cops ran up the stairs, and a minute later they reappeared with you in tow. You were kicking and screaming and carrying on, and they were whacking you with their clubs, and finally they forced you to your knees, then your gut, and they dragged you face down the stairs. Holy shit, I said, seriously? What was Louis doing while all that happened? Well, she said, he was cheering on the cops, telling them you deserved every lick and more. You know, she said, that was a pretty wacky relationship you two guys had. Oh, I said, you can say that again. So why, back in Burlingame, hadn't I taken advantage of this miraculous gift Lonesome had given me, rented myself a nice little studio in a courtyard maybe, and sat down to write that great American novel I was always talking about? Well, I got to say, like cartooning for a career, it never occurred to me. I mean, writing was a great passion of my life, and I was pretty sure that's what I'd spend the rest of my life doing if I lived. But in the meanwhile, there was a whole alcoholism thing to deal with. Because not only was I a drunk, I liked being one. You know, have you ever seen Leaving Las Vegas with Nicolas Cage? That was me at 20. With fistfuls of psychedelics thrown in, so I could stay up longer and drink more. The only thing that kept me sober at all was earning a living on those shitty jobs. And when Louie removed that factor, it was open season on my liver and brain. Well, there was the hangovers too. They were getting worse and worse. So along with the trembling and shaking in the morning, I started to feel the dread and hallucinate. That's what was going on in that San Angelo drunk tank the next morning when Louie bailed me out. His father was a bigwig in town, apparently, and he told me he'd make the assault charges disappear, then led me out to his new, sleek, white Buick Barracuda. He sat me down in the passenger seat and then handed me a pint of tequila, the breakfast of champions. You know, I took a couple long glugs, watched as Louie steered us through town. All I remember, I'd never been in a place that was so beige. And finally I said to Louie, well, you know, how's the manic thing going? And he said, there was never any manic thing, Park. That was all an act I did to get out of the nut house my family put me in when I got back from California. I mean, you jump under a bus and all of a sudden you're a suicidal depressive? Can you imagine? Yeah, I said, yeah. So he says, I fake the whole thing with manic episodes. And that way the shrinks figure lithium will keep me in line and they release me. Even Marion Claire later was part of that charade. And now I said, well, he said, I can't pretend anymore. So now the family wants to commit me again. Particularly since I've been blowing granddaddy's bucks on a giant, drunken hippie from California, of all places. Well, I said, if you get committed, your meal ticket disappears, Park, so you better start writing. It was still early, but so far, the grass was definitely not greener in Texas.